On the outer rim of known space, where starlight grew thin and silence stretched for light years, the Viridian ring spun slowly against the black. It was not a planet, not a ship, but a great circle of metal and glass built by many hands over centuries, a meeting place for the Galactic Council. Inside its bright halls, delegates from dozens of species gathered beneath soft blue lights, their voices a low hum of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. Today's session carried weight. The matter before them was small in scale but sharp in consequence. The humans of Sol System. They were a young species barely spacefaring for 2 centuries. They had no grand empire, no ancient lineage, no seat on the council. Yet they had done something no one expected. They had perfected the jump drive independently without help or guidance. Worse, they refused to share it. Not out of greed, their ambassador claimed, but caution. "We've seen what happens when powerful tools fall into careless hands," he had said during his last appearance. The council had laughed then, not loudly, but with the quiet smugness of those who believe they've long outgrown violence. Now Elder Kalen of the Zenthari stood at the center of the chamber. He was old even by his people's standards. His silver skin lined like cracked stone, his eyes deep and still as ancient lakes. The Zenthari rarely spoke in council. When they did, others listened, or they used to. Kalen raised a thin hand and the room fell quiet. "I have studied the records," he began, his voice soft but clear through the translators. "Not the polished summaries in your archives, but the raw logs. Battle footage, intercepted comms, survivor accounts from their world wars. Humans do not wage war like we do. They do not seek balance or honor in conflict. They seek to end it, permanently." A murmur rippled through the chamber. A reptilian delegate from the Virac sector shifted, his scales clicking. "Elder, with respect, that was centuries ago. They are part of the interstellar community now. They follow our laws, do they?" Kalen asked. "They have refused every request for technology sharing. They patrol their borders with ships that vanish from sensors. They speak peace, but their silence is louder than their words. I tell you this not to accuse, but to warn. If you push them, if you treat them as children to be scolded or punished, you will learn what their silence truly means." Admiral Carter stood in the upper observation gallery, hidden behind tinted glass. He was a tall man with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore no uniform, only a dark civilian suit, so no one recognized him as Earth's top fleet strategist. He listened to Kalen's words and felt a cold knot form in his stomach, not because the elder was wrong, but because no one would believe him. Down below, Councillor Morella of the Thalan delegation stood. She was elegant, with smooth violet skin and a voice like wind through crystal. "Elder Kalen," she said gently, "your wisdom is valued, but fear should not dictate policy. The humans are isolated, yes, but not dangerous. They lack the numbers, the resources, the unity to threaten anyone. What they need is guidance, not fear." Others nodded. A vote was called. The motion passed with near unanimous support. Earth would be sanctioned, their trade routes restricted, their diplomatic access revoked, and their jump drive designs demanded for galactic safety review. If they refused, enforcement fleets would be sent. Kalen said nothing more. He bowed slightly and walked away, his steps slow but steady. As he passed beneath the gallery, he paused for just a second, his eyes lifting toward the glass. Carter wondered if the old alien had seen him. Probably not. But it felt like he had back on Earth. News of the sanctions arrived like a storm. People were angry, confused, scared. But the United Earth government held firm. "We will not be bullied," President Lincoln said in a brief address. "We will not hand over the keys to our future because others demand it." Behind closed doors, however, the real work began. Shipyards on the moon went into double shifts. Research labs ran day and night. Encrypted messages flew between Mars, Titan, and the Kuiper Belt stations. No one spoke of war. They spoke of readiness. Meanwhile, on a quiet freighter drifting near Jupiter's orbit, Luke Miller checked the engine diagnostics for the 3rd time that shift. He was 28 with calloused hands and a dry sense of humor. He'd spent the last 6 months repairing deep space haulers, saving credits to buy a small plot on Mars. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even political. He just wanted to go home. His ship, the MV Horizon, carried medical supplies and food for Europa colony. It flew under human registry, unarmed, clearly marked. 3 days later, a council patrol vessel, Kestros 7, intercepted the horizon near Europa's ice fields. The patrol claimed the freighter's transponder signal was irregular, possibly mimicking a smuggler's code. They ordered it to power down for inspection. Luke complied. He even opened a comms channel, calm and polite. "This is Horizon Civilian Transport. We're carrying perishable meds. Please make this quick." What happened next was caught on 3 separate black boxes. The patrol vessel fired a warning shot, standard procedure, but their targeting system glitched or their officer panicked. The plasma bolt struck the Horizon's bridge directly. The ship broke apart in seconds. 47 souls vanished into the cold dark. Luke Miller was among them. The council issued a statement within hours. Tragic error. Deep regret. Full investigation underway. They offered compensation to the families. They called it an accident, a mistake born of tension and faulty tech. To them, it was a footnote. To Earth, it was a spark. Admiral Carter watched the recovered footage in a dim briefing room beneath Geneva. He saw Luke's face on the comm screen, calm, tired, human, then static, then nothing. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was low, steady, and final. "They think we'll accept an apology. They think we'll move on." He turned to the officers around him. "We won't. But for now, Earth said nothing. No protests, no threats. Just silence." And in that silence, something began to grow. Something quiet, patient, and utterly unforgiving. Elder Kalen, watching from his distant observatory, felt the shift in the stars. He whispered a single word in his native tongue, one with no direct translation but close enough to mean, "It begins." No one else heard him. No one else cared. And that, more than anything, sealed their fate. Months passed after the Europa incident, and the silence from Earth grew heavier with each passing day. The Galactic Council mistook it for submission. They held memorial services, issued more statements, and slowly returned to business as usual. Trade resumed between member worlds. New laws were debated, and the tragedy near Jupiter became just another entry in the archives. Sad, but closed. No one noticed the quiet changes happening in human space. On Earth, the streets were calm, markets bustled, schools opened, and night skies still glittered with satellites. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. Shipyards on the far side of the moon worked around the clock, their lights hidden behind layers of thermal shielding. Old cargo haulers were pulled from storage and rebuilt with reinforced hulls and hidden weapon mounts. Engineers like Jake Holt, who once fixed mining drones on Ceres, now spent their days rewiring power cores for warships disguised as freighters. He didn't talk much. He just worked, his hands moving fast, his eyes tired but focused. He'd known Luke Miller in training school. They'd shared coffee and bad jokes during long shifts. Now Luke was gone, and Jake had a job to do. Meanwhile, in a secure underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Captain Dana Ellis stood before a large holotable. She was in her late 30s with short brown hair and a voice that didn't need to be loud to be obeyed. Around her, senior officers from United Earth Command watched as star maps flickered in blue light. At the center of the table glowed a single red symbol, Operation Iron Remembrance. No one had seen the full plan yet. Only fragments had been shared. But everyone knew what it meant. This wasn't about defense anymore. This was about making sure no one ever forgot what happened to the Horizon. Dana tapped the table, and the image changed to show Viridian Ring, the Council's pride, their symbol of unity. "They think we're weak because we don't shout," she said. "They think we'll accept their excuses because we haven't fired back. But they don't understand us. We don't rage. We remember. And when we act, it's not emotion, it's math." The room stayed quiet. They all knew the risks. If they failed, Earth would be crushed under the full weight of the Council fleet. If they succeeded, they might buy decades of peace or start a war that would burn across the stars. But there was no turning back. Not after Europa. Back in orbit, Admiral Carter reviewed final logistics from his private shuttle. He rarely visited Earth anymore. Too many eyes, too many questions. From space, he could watch the planet turn, green and blue and fragile, and remind himself why they were doing this. Not for revenge, not really, but for respect. For the right to exist without being pushed around by beings who saw humans as loud, messy children playing with toys they didn't deserve. On Mars, colonists went about their lives unaware. Children played in domed parks. Farmers tended hydroponic fields and scientists studied the red soil. But in hidden bunkers, Beneath the surface, communication arrays hummed with encrypted signals. Every human outpost from Titan to the edge of the Oort cloud was syncing to a single timeline. No one knew the exact date, only that it would come soon. Then the Council made their final mistake. They announced a grand memorial service aboard Viridian Ring to honor all lives lost in recent tensions, including the crew of the Horizon. They invited human representatives. It was meant as a gesture of healing, a show of unity, but to Earth it felt like mockery. They were being asked to stand on the stage where their dead were reduced to a footnote in someone else's story. Dana Ellis received the invitation on a secure channel. She read it once, then deleted it without comment. That night, she authorized the final phase. All units were to be ready within 72 hours. Jake Holt finished his last retrofit on the stealth corvette named Dusk. It looked like a standard supply ship from the outside, but inside its engines could fold space for short jumps and its hull absorbed sensor pings like a shadow. He ran a final diagnostic, then sat alone in the cockpit for a long moment. He thought of Luke. He didn't pray. He just whispered, "This one's for you." On the day of the memorial, Viridian Ring gleamed under artificial sunlight. Delegates arrived in polished shuttles wearing ceremonial robes. Music played, soft, mournful tones meant to soothe. Councillor Morella gave a speech about unity, loss, and the hope for a better future. Elder Kalen watched from a private balcony, his face unreadable. He felt something in the air. A tension, a stillness like the moment before lightning strikes. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. Alarms stayed silent, but the ring's defense grid went dark. Comms channels filled with static. From empty space near the ring's docking arm, 12 human vessels emerged. Not with explosions, but with perfect silence. Their hulls were matte black, their shapes unfamiliar. They moved like ghosts. Captain Ellis stood on the bridge of the Dusk, her hands clasped behind her back. She opened a channel that broadcast across every frequency the Council used. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried no anger, only certainty. "You were warned," the Council panicked. Security teams scrambled, but the human ships weren't attacking people. They targeted only military assets, weapon silos, shield generators, command relays. Within 3 minutes, Viridian Ring was defenseless. No shots were fired at civilians, no lives were taken. But the message was louder than any bomb. On Earth, people watched the news feeds with wide eyes. They saw their ships, small, quiet, precise, doing what no one thought possible. For the first time in months, hope returned. Not wild hope, but hard, quiet hope. The kind that comes from knowing your side finally stood up. Elder Kalen closed his eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. And far below, in a lunar dry dock, Jake Holt powered up another corvette. The work wasn't done. This was only the beginning. The Council's shock lasted only a few hours before it turned to rage. Viridian Ring, their crown jewel, had been humiliated without a single shot fired in anger. Humans had walked in like shadows, cut their defenses to nothing, and left a message that echoed through every diplomatic channel. "You were warned." The Council called an emergency session. Voices rose in fury. "How dare they? Who do they think they are? We will crush them." They spoke as if Earth were a rebellious colony, not a sovereign system with a growing fleet and a will of iron. Within days, the Council began assembling its response. Ships poured in from a dozen member worlds, sleek Thalen cruisers, armored Virex destroyers, Xanthari observation vessels that hung back like silent judges. They formed a massive armada, the largest since the Kethar Rebellion 2 centuries prior. Their plan was simple: march on Sol, blockade Earth, and force unconditional surrender. They expected fear. They expected begging. They did not expect silence. On Earth, there was no panic, no last-minute speeches or frantic evacuations. Instead, cities dimmed their lights at night. Orbital defenses powered down to minimal output. Civilian traffic between Mars and the Belt slowed to a trickle. To outside sensors, the Sol system looked empty, almost abandoned. The Council took this as weakness. Their fleet pushed forward confident and loud. But in the dark between the planets, humans waited. Captain Dana Ellis commanded from the bridge of the Ares, a newly commissioned carrier built in secret beneath Titan's ice crust. It was not the biggest ship in human space, but it was smart. Its systems ran on adaptive AI that learned enemy patterns in real time. Around it, a small group of corvettes and frigates held position near the asteroid belt. Ships like the Dusk, now battle-tested and upgraded. They did not engage. They watched. They recorded. They waited for the right moment. That moment came when the Council fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter. They were spread wide, their formation proud and open, certain no threat remained. That was their first mistake. Their second was underestimating human patience. As the lead Thalen cruiser passed a cluster of tumbling rocks near Callisto, hidden charges detonated, not bombs. Smart mines disguised as space debris, programmed to activate only when a specific hull signature passed within range. The explosion wasn't huge, but it crippled the cruiser's engine array and knocked out its comms. Before the Council could react, drone swarms launched from hidden bays inside nearby asteroids. Small, fast, and nearly invisible, they latched onto supply tenders and jammed their navigation systems. Chaos spread through the fleet like a virus. Meanwhile, Jake Holt led a team of 6 pilots in a daring raid on the Kestros Nebula shipyard, a major repair and refit station for the Council's Eastern Front. They flew in aboard modified freighters, their transponders broadcasting fake Virex clearance codes. Once inside the yard's perimeter, they dropped their disguise. In under 20 minutes, they planted shaped charges on 3 dry docks, 2 fuel depots, and the central command hub. They didn't stay to watch it burn. They jumped out before the first alarm sounded, vanishing into the nebula's ion clouds. Back in Sol, Dana coordinated the next phase. Human ships struck fast and vanished. They hit relay stations, cut data lines, and ambushed scout patrols. They never held ground. They didn't need to. Their goal wasn't to win battles. It was to make the Council doubt every shadow, every signal, every quiet stretch of space. Fear began to spread among alien crews. Whispers started in mess halls. The humans don't fight fair. They don't show their faces. They don't even seem angry. That scared them more than any weapon. Elder Kalen watched from his cloaked vessel drifting near Saturn's rings. He saw what others refused to see. This wasn't chaos. It was precision. Every move had purpose. Every loss the Council suffered was part of a larger design. He sent a private message to Counselor Mirella, urging restraint, warning that they were walking into a trap built not of steel, but of time and memory. She dismissed it. The Elder is old, she told her aides. He sees ghosts where there are only frightened children. But the ghosts were real. One night, a Virex destroyer patrolling near Uranus received a distress call from a damaged freighter. Standard protocol demanded assistance. As the destroyer moved to help, it passed through a cloud of frozen methane. Hidden inside were human stealth drones. They latched onto the hull, drilled through armor, and flooded the engine room with neural suppressant gas. The crew never fired a shot. They simply fell asleep. By morning, the destroyer was gone, towed into the dark by silent tugs. Rumors grew. Some said humans used mind weapons. Others claimed they controlled space itself. None of it was true. Humans used what they had: clever engineering, deep knowledge of their own system, and a refusal to play by the Council's rules. They fought like survivors, not soldiers, and survivors do not waste energy on pride. On Earth, people went to work. Children went to school. But in the evenings, families gathered around news feeds watching grainy footage of Council ships drifting dead in space. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They just nodded quietly. This was not joy. This was justice. Slow and steady. Admiral Carter stood on a hill outside Denver looking up at the stars. He knew the Council would send more ships. They would not stop until they were broken or Earth was. But he also knew something they didn't. Humans had spent centuries fighting each other. They knew loss. They knew pain. And more than anything, they knew how to endure. The Council thought this was a war of weapons. It wasn't. It was a war of will. And in that war, humans had already won the first round. Far away, in the silent void between stars, Elder Kalen whispered again, "They do not forget. They do not forgive." And for the first time, he wondered if even his people had underestimated what silence could do. The Council's pride turned to panic as their losses mounted. Ship after ship vanished from their fleet logs, not destroyed in glorious battle, but erased quietly, like footprints in the rain. Supply lines snapped. Repair yards burned. Morale crumbled. Crews began refusing orders to enter human-controlled space. Whispers of curses and ghost ships spread through mess halls. Even the Virex, known for their discipline, started double-checking empty corridors. The humans were not where they should be, and that made them everywhere. Desperate, the Council gathered their remaining strength. They pull. Ed ships from distant borders recalled peacekeeping forces and pressed neutral worlds into service. A new armada formed, bigger, angrier, and more determined than before. This time, they would not be fooled. They would march straight to Earth, ignore distractions, and end this madness with overwhelming force. They called it the final thrust. They believed it would be swift, but Earth had no intention of meeting them head-on. As the Council fleet gathered near Neptune's orbit, human forces did the unexpected. They disappeared. Orbital stations went dark. Lunar bases powered down. Even Mars showed no signs of life beyond basic atmospheric readings. To the Council's scanners, Sol system was empty. It looked like surrender. It looked like fear. It was neither. Hidden deep in the Kuiper Belt inside hollowed-out comets and disguised ice mines, human ships waited. Captain Dana Ellis had moved the Ares far from the inner system, anchoring it near a frozen dwarf planet cloaked in sensor-scattering dust. From there, she watched the Council's advance like a hunter watching prey walk into a trap. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her crew understood. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about making sure there was no fight left to win. The Council fleet pushed inward, scanning every rock, every signal. They found nothing. No ambushes, no drones, no resistance. They grew bolder. They laughed on open channels, mocking human cowardice. Then, as they crossed the orbit of Uranus, the first trap sprung. A series of old navigation buoys, left over from early human exploration, suddenly activated. They emitted a low-frequency pulse that scrambled short-range comms and confused targeting systems. Before the Council could react, minefields hidden inside asteroid clusters detonated in sequence, not to destroy, but to scatter. The fleet broke formation, ships veering wildly to avoid debris. In that moment of chaos, human stealth corvettes struck. They came from below, from above, from blind spots created by Jupiter's magnetic field. They fired not plasma or lasers, but kinetic rods. Tungsten spikes dropped from high orbit that hit with the force of small nukes, but left no energy signature. 3 Council cruisers lost engines. 2 more suffered hull breaches. No human ship stayed to finish them. They vanished as quickly as they appeared. Meanwhile, Jake Holt led a second strike, this time against the Council's main logistics hub near the Pluto Relay. Posing as a damaged Thalen freighter, his team slipped past outer patrols. Once inside the station, they planted data worms, tiny programs that didn't destroy systems but rewrote them. By morning, the hub's inventory log showed full supplies while its tanks were empty. Repair drones turned on their own ships. Docking clamps locked shut during emergency evacuations. The station didn't explode. It simply stopped working and no one knew why. Back on Earth, life continued. Farmers harvested crops in domed fields. Students studied physics and history, but in quiet rooms beneath cities. Analysts tracked every Council movement, feeding data to Dana's command net. They knew where the enemy would go before the enemy did. They had spent months mapping patrol routes, fuel consumption rates, even crew shift changes. This war was not fought with rage, but with records. The Council began to fracture. The Thalen demanded a retreat. The Virex accused others of cowardice. Even Councillor Morella, once so sure of human weakness, now spoke in hushed tones about unforeseen variables. Elder Kalen sent another message, this time to the entire Council chamber. "You are not fighting an enemy," he said. "You are walking through a graveyard they built with your own hands. Leave while you still can." No one listened. Then came the final blow. The Council's flagship, the Sovereign Will, led the charge toward Mars. They believed Earth's last defenses would rally there. Instead, as they entered the red planet's shadow, every human satellite in orbit went silent. Then all at once they activated, not as weapons but as mirrors. They reflected solar energy into a single focused beam that overloaded the flagship's shields for just 10 seconds, long enough for a single corvette, the Dusk, to slip inside its blind spot and plant a device on its primary reactor. The explosion was contained, but catastrophic. The Sovereign Will didn't blow apart. It simply went dark, drifting like a dead whale in space. Its loss broke the Council's spirit. Ships began turning back without orders. Others powered down, waiting for commands that never came. On Earth, no one celebrated. They simply prepared for what came next. Admiral Carter stood in a quiet room watching the fleet scatter on a star map. He knew the Council would sue for peace soon. They had no choice, but he also knew humans would not offer easy terms. Forgiveness was not in their nature. Remembrance was. And in the cold dark near Saturn, Elder Kalen closed his eyes. The stars no longer felt safe. They felt watched. The council came to Sol not with weapons but with white flags. Their armada was gone, scattered, broken, or silent in the dark. What remained was a single diplomatic vessel, small and unarmed, flying the neutral colors of the Thalen envoy. It drifted at the edge of human space near the orbit of Neptune and sent a simple message. We wish to talk. No demands, no threats, just a request. Earth did not reply for 3 days. The silence stretched heavy and cold until the envoy repeated the message. Then finally a human ship appeared, a corvette, sleek and black, no markings, no name. It guided the envoy inward, not to Earth, not to Mars, but to a quiet point in space near the asteroid belt where the Ares waited, its lights dim, its weapons hidden but ready. Captain Dana Ellis stood on the bridge, arms crossed, face calm. She watched the envoy shuttle dock through the viewport. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply waited. When the council delegates stepped onto the Ares, they were met not with anger but with quiet efficiency. No guards shouted. No alarms blared. Just soft lights and firm instructions. They were led to a plain conference room with a metal table and 6 chairs. Dana entered last alone. She sat without invitation. The lead envoy, a Thalen named Virek, cleared his throat. Captain Ellis, he began, voice tight. We come in good faith. The council acknowledges the regrettable events that led to this conflict. We seek peace. We propose full restoration of trade, lifting of all sanctions, and a joint commission to review past actions. Dana listened without moving. When he finished, she leaned forward slightly. You lost 7 fleets, she said. You burned shipyards, crippled colonies, and killed civilians. Then you call it regrettable events. She paused. We don't want commissions. We don't want reviews. We want terms. Virek shifted. Of course. Name them. First, Dana said, all sanctions against Earth are lifted immediately. Second, full reparations paid for every human life lost, every ship destroyed, every station damaged, calculated in hard resources, not credits. Third, a permanent non-interference pact. No council ship enters human space without written permission. No surveillance. No inspections. No demands. Virek opened his mouth, then closed it. And if we refuse? Dana looked at him, not with hate but with certainty. Then you go home and tell your people to prepare for round 2. Only next time we won't stop at your shipyards. We'll come to your homeworlds. We'll shut down your grids, poison your comms, and leave you in the dark until you beg for the silence we gave you today. She leaned back. But I don't think you'll refuse. Because you finally understand. Humans don't forgive. We remember. And we act. Virek said nothing for a long time. Then he nodded. The terms were signed within the hour. Transmitted across human and council networks. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a digital signature and a quiet handshake that meant nothing and everything. On Earth, people heard the news and went back to work. There were no parades, no victory songs. In Geneva, President Lincoln stood before a small group of advisors and said only, "It's done." In a lunar memorial garden, a new stone was placed beside Luke Miller's. It bore no name, only a number, 47. For all those lost on the horizon, flowers were left, real ones grown in Mars soil. No one spoke. They just stood, remembered, and walked away. Jake Holt stood on the observation deck of a repair station near Ceres. He watched the envoy ship depart, its lights fading into the distance. He thought of Luke, of coffee breaks and stupid jokes in 0G. He didn't feel joy. He felt peace, the kind that comes after a long storm. He turned and walked back to his workshop. There was still work to do, ships to fix, systems to upgrade. Peace wasn't the end. It was just another shift. Admiral Carter returned to Earth for the first time in over a year. He walked through a quiet park in Seattle, watching children play under real sunlight. He sat on a bench and closed his eyes. He didn't think about fleets or treaties. He thought about silence. The kind that follows thunder. The kind that says, "We are done." Far from Sol, Elder Kalen watched the treaty broadcast from his observatory. He did not smile. He did not sigh. He simply turned off the screen and walked to the edge of his balcony, where the stars stretched forever. He whispered the old Zenthari word again, the one that meant it ends, but also it begins anew. He knew humans would not become conquerors. They had no taste for empire, but they would never be pushed again. And that changed everything. In the years that followed, human space grew quiet. Trade resumed, but on human terms. Council. Ships gave Sol a wide berth. New outposts were built beyond the Kuiper Belt, not for war but for watchfulness. Humans did not boast. They did not gloat. They simply existed, strong and steady like mountains after a storm. And whenever a new species asked about the humans, Elder Kalen would say only this: they do not forget. They do not forgive. But if you honor their silence, they will honor yours. On Earth, night fell. Lights glowed in windows. Somewhere, a child asked a parent about the stars. The parent pointed up and said, "That's ours." And we keep what's ours. No one shouted. No one threatened. They just lived. Because the war was over, and remembrance was enough.